and then his sister-in-law and his brother Neil, otherwise known as Moon, because he used to love Moon Mullins. So that's the immediate family behind the President, Mrs. Reagan.
Passing in front of the President, the first unit, the equestrian unit, the U.S. Park Police Horse Unit from Washington, D.C., and they are leading off this inaugural parade. Now the President and the First Lady are in place to view their parade.
Each of these parade units, as we've said, have been divided into different groups, and what you're seeing now is each of them has a military escort ahead of them. You're going to be seeing the bands from the Northeast, but before that will be a great many military units before the actual youngsters come out and do their number. I believe that this is the General of the Army, Omar Bradley, in that car we just saw in that limousine. He is the Grand Marshal of the 1981 inaugural parade, 5-star General.
He graduated from West Point back in 1915. I'll give you all one guess as to what unit that is. You can't see them, but you don't have to. The President's own, the United States Marine Band.
Called the President's own because Thomas Jefferson had a special interest in the band, and it was known as the President's own band. From Culver Military Academy, the Culver Military Academy Black Horse Troop, carrying flags representing the 50 states and the 6 territories. They come down Pennsylvania Avenue. Their 9th appearance in an inaugural parade. Charlie Gibson said earlier, the President likes horses, and there are horses and horses and horses in this parade.
It's all kind of overwhelming, isn't it, Barbara? The music, the one band kind of bleeding into the next. They've made every effort to keep these bands spaced far enough apart so that the sound of one does not overlap the sound of the other. But it's almost inevitable in a parade like this that before you stop hearing one band, you start picking up the sound of the next one. And this is the United States Military Academy Band.
West Point.
It's the oldest military band in continuous service in the United States. It antedates the Revolutionary War. About them apples.
Just before we went to Plains, I had said something about the Alaskan dogs being dog-napped. They were, but they were returned. I don't want to leave you in suspense. You will be seeing them today.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
I didn't
they
know
weren't
they were
returned,
back.
they were found. They found the dog-nappers. The long gray line of the U.S. Military Academy.
This, I believe, is the Connecticut Governor's Horse Guard.
These horses are of mixed breed, in case you're a horse lover. The unit is ceremonial. It performs at gubernatorial inaugurations and other parades. Now, this is the Cardinal O'Hara High School Bicentennial Marching Band from Springfield, Pennsylvania. It was named the Bicentennial Band because it was formed in 1976. It made its first appearance at the Philadelphia Freedom Week festivity during our bicentennial. They're wearing colonial costumes from the Revolutionary War period.
Very few people here wearing costumes from 1980.
They also, this group, played at the welcoming ceremonies when Pope John Paul II visited Philadelphia. So the city's very proud of them. Now, right behind them, you see the 1st Troop Philadelphia City Cavalry.
All right, Barbara, we're going to break away now from the parade and move back down to Plains, Georgia, where former President Carter is about to make a few remarks. He's at the microphone.
Nobody gave me permission to speak, but I'm going to do it this time. In the first place, I think this is a good sign that Georgia, for the farmers in 1981, is going to have plenty of rain. There's no way for me to describe how I feel now, but I would like to say, although I haven't had a chance to see my bed either Sunday night or Monday night, that in the last few hours I've had a lot of very emotional experiences. I won't mention them all, but I would say that one of them was this morning. I won't say exactly what time yet. I got word from sure sources that both planes in Iran were lined up on the runway, ready to take off. That was a thrilling experience for me. The next time was when I came out to Andrews Air Force Base, having had a chance to serve as president of the greatest nation on earth, and stood there with my wife and the vice president and his wife Joan, and heard the Star-Spangled Banner played, and they fired the 21-gun salute for president. And my heart was filled with a realization of what it means to be free and what it means to be a citizen of the greatest and the strongest and the most decent nation on earth. And I had to fight back the tears. And for the last 14 months, Rosalind and I and the Secretaries of State and others have stayed in close touch with the hostage families. And as George said, as I came toward him in Air Force One, Mrs. Schaefer, who is the wife of the senior military man being held by the hostages, said to me, "Mr. President, I hope someday you'll have a chance to meet my husband." And I put my arms around, and George was watching, and I said, "I'll be with him tomorrow, and I'll tell him you love him." That was another experience that I'll never forget. All emotional, and this is a fourth one that I'll mention. It's coming back home to the town where I was born and raised, and seeing the streets filled with my friends. It's a deeply emotional experience for me, and I might say that when those planes were lined up, when they played the Star-Spangled Banner, when I put my arms around Mrs. Schaefer, and when I saw this crowd of friends and neighbors, all three were emotional, but they weren't sad. Every single one of them, including coming back to Georgia, is a happy experience for me, and I thank God for it. There are still restraints on me, some self-imposed, some agreements with foreign nations about mentioning the American hostages who have been held so long in Iran. But I have not had a chance yet to make a statement about them, and I thought because of the intense interest in these 52 people around the world that I would say a few words to you about them. Just a few moments ago, on Air Force One, before we landed at Warner Robins, I had received word officially for the first time that the aircraft carrying the 52 American hostages had cleared Iranian airspace on the first leg of a journey home, and that every one of the 52 hostages was alive, was well, and free. It's impossible for me to realize, or any of us, how they feel on that plane, because they recognize that they are hostages no more, they are prisoners no more, and they are coming back to this land that we all love. Our diplomats will be arriving sometimes in the near future, I can't yet tell you exactly when, in Algiers. The Algerians, the last few weeks, have been real heroes. They have literally worked day and night from their president, their foreign minister, the president of our national bank, and others to try to gain the freedom of the American hostages. And I want to express my personal and also my political, official, and public thanks to the people of Algeria. They will be flying on 2 Algerian planes. They are now. They'll refuel in Athens, Greece. After they land in Algiers, they will transfer to American planes, and they will fly from there to Germany, land near Frankfurt in a military air base, and go from there about 30 miles away to the hospitals in Wiesbaden, Germany, where American doctors and others will be waiting for them. Former Secretary Cyrus Vance will be there to shake their hands and to put his arms around them when they come down from the airplane. I had the plane standing by in Washington with Secretary Vance in charge, and I directed that the plane take off the moment the hostage plane's wheels cleared the ground. After a brief rest in Germany, 3 or 4 days probably, then the hostages will come back home to be reunited with their families. As suggested yesterday morning by our new President, Reagan, early tomorrow morning, I will leave for Germany to welcome our hostages to freedom. And I know I will take with me the joy and the relief of our entire nation. Throughout this time of trial, we Americans have stood as one, united in our prayers, steadfast in our concern for fellow Americans in peril. I doubt if any time in our history more prayers have reached heaven for any Americans than have been given to God in the last 14 months. We've achieved at the end of this crisis the 2 objectives that I set for this nation and for myself when they were first seized: to secure their safety and their ultimate release, and to do so on terms that would always preserve the honor and the dignity and the best interest of our nation. As I said a few hours ago in a brief press announcement, the essence of this agreement is that as our people are freed, we're releasing a part of the assets belonging to Iran, which I froze by presidential order after our embassy was seized and our hostages were taken. There will also be established a firm, established procedure involving binding arbitration completely in accordance with American law and international law to resolve any remaining claims that might exist by American people against Iran or vice versa. Our people held captive and their families here at home have borne this ordeal with courage and with honor. Our nation acted as a great nation ought to act, not only with justified outrage at a despicable and illegal act, not only with courage and conviction, but with constant purpose and constant restraint in the face of severe provocation, working always to uphold the law in the face of lawlessness in Iran. We've kept faith with our principles and our people, and as a result, we've reached this day of joy and thanksgiving. In closing, let me say that I want to thank all the foreign governments and people, literally thousands of them, who stood with us for these principles of international law and decency. I thank all those abroad who helped us in these many difficult ways and throughout these difficult months, and particularly, as I said, the government of Algeria. I thank my successor, President Reagan, for the care with which he has approached this issue, along with all the new members of his administration, and the many people in and out of government, patriots like Warren Christopher, who gave me the report recently on Air Force One, and all his colleagues who went and stayed in Algiers the last few days and who labored to achieve this agreement and this goal. My thoughts at this moment are with the families of the hostages, yes, because they showed such dignity and such patience. And I'm thinking also of those who risked their lives and those who gave their lives on a desert in Iran for their fellow Americans with an utmost show of courage and conviction and a commitment to freedom. In this time of rejoicing, their sacrifice, their grief, their pride, their patriotism must not be forgotten by any American. And finally, I want to thank all of you, my fellow Americans, proud people, not naturally patient, who have stood by me the last 14 months in very troubled times, but thinking always about how can we keep those hostages alive, how can we ensure that they are not injured, how can we be sure they come to freedom, how can we protect our nation's interest. I thank you for your concern, your support, your patience in a time that has so tested our national wisdom as well as our national will. As I left Washington, I directed as the last act as president that the lights of the Christmas tree be turned on so that we can give thanks to God for bringing our hostages home. Rosalind and I and Amy, Chip and Jack and Jeffrey, their wives, my grandchildren, are all very grateful for the honor that you've given us to go to Washington, to live in the White House for 4 years, and to serve there under sometimes difficult circumstances, keeping our nation strong, keeping our nation at peace, binding our people together, upholding the principles and the ideals, the hopes and dreams of Americans that have always made our country great. You've honored us beyond anything imaginable as I walk the streets of this town to sell boiled peanuts to the merchants in the stores here. And we hope forever to honor you with our lives in the years to come in being great Americans, and being good Georgians, and being good Sumter Countyans, and good residents of Plains, Georgia. God bless you. We love you all.
Well, that's the speech that Jimmy Carter has been waiting all these many months to give, and indeed it was the speech he wanted so badly to give this morning before he left the White House, but he was not to be denied. Here he is being welcomed home to Plains, Georgia by thousands of people. It really is an enormous turnout for a small town, and the president expressing his heartfelt emotions at the return of the hostages. We would like to tell you that on Thursday night, ABC will have a special edition of 2020 on the secret negotiations of the Iran crisis. It'll be hosted by Pierre Salinger. It'll have interviews with more than 50 people in 20 countries and will reveal what our nation did to negotiate an end to the crisis from day one. And that will be followed later by an expanded edition of Nightline with a discussion of the same subject. There's President Carter dancing with Rosalind Carter. And it's an extraordinary picture. It's been a hard 2 days for this man. He hasn't slept in 48 hours. As Frank Reynolds noted earlier, he's got a broken collarbone. This has not been an easy period for him, but he's made the most of it. And again, to the point of tediousness, I suppose it has to be noted that he has done it with great graciousness.
I understand that Bert Lance is there. He's wearing a dark green coat, and he's standing behind President Carter under the M in Jimmy. I don't know whether you can see it from here, but it's his old friend, Bert Lance. Jimmy Carter has come home to Plains. And here, the parade has been going on. All the marchers, all the celebrators.
We should, I suppose, offer at least a word of apology to those units that have been going by for the past 5 or 6 minutes while former President Carter was speaking. It was important to hear what he had to say when he said it, but to all those people who've practiced so long and hard and whose families and friends were waiting to see them, all we can do is apologize to you. But it's been a beautiful parade. It's been passing behind us as we were here, and hopefully you'll be able to see videotapes of those units that you did not see today.
That's the American Morgan Horse Association, if you're just looking on your screen now. And we're going to go right now. Our coverage is going to continue. We'll be back in just a moment.
I needed the mileage of a Toyota Cressida, but it didn't have enough room. What I needed was the room of a Volvo, but it didn't get good enough mileage. What I needed was a citation. What I didn't need was the price. What I needed was a miracle. What I found was a Fairmont.
Ford Fairmont. It makes a world of sense.
A world of better ideas coming from Ford.
Is your laxative hard on your system? Hard to take? Well, take it easy with Instant Mix Metamucil. Easy to take along and easy to take. And Instant Mix Metamucil takes it easy on your system because it's made from natural fiber. No chemical stimulants. No wonder doctors recommend Metamucil more often than any other laxative brand. So try Instant Mix Metamucil and take it easy.
If not nature, Metamucil.
When your financial plan helps you keep up so inflation won't get you down.
You really believe in those IDS ideas.
When her hard work earns a degree, but your investments help pay for it.
You really believe in those IDS ideas.
Good money ideas from your IDS representative. When they help you reach your goals.
You really believe in those IDS ideas.
Ideas to help you manage money from IDS.
See this ugly yellow stain? That's what comes from cigar or cigarette smoke. Just think what smoking a pack a day, every day, could do to your teeth. But look, here's Topol, the smoker's tooth polish that helps remove all kinds of superficial tobacco stains. Topol starts to work immediately to clean your teeth and to help remove these stains. Just use Topol week after week and watch your teeth get brighter and brighter. Topol, the smoker's tooth polish, now in 3-ounce regular or 7-ounce fluoride.
Taxi guys take a mountain vacation.
Something ate all our food. We're gonna die.
And end up in a mountain of trouble. And on soap, what did Maggie do to straighten out Jody?
There was nowhere to watch out.
And does Danny by the farm? Then, a mystery in Vegas.
No murder weapon?
B, witnesses a killing.
No victim?
But when Dan checks it out,
no bloodstains.
There's not a trace of foul play.
Tomorrow, starting at 9, 8 Central and Mountain on ABC.
What you are seeing and listening to now is the United States Merchant Marine Academy staff. And just a little while ago, we saw the Coast Guard band march by.
The reason Barbara raises that is that 20 years ago, Jack Kennedy, as one of his first official acts, took an aide aside just after this inaugural parade. He had noticed that there was not a single black face among the Coast Guard band, and he ordered that something be done about that, about integrating the Coast Guard. Well, it's 20 years later. We'd like to think we've come a long way, but the Coast Guard band marched past just a few minutes ago, not a single black face.
We have just received word that the hostages have landed in Athens. And what a day this is with the 2 stories, Jimmy Carter, planes, hostages, 3 stories, and the inauguration here. The hostages, to repeat, have landed in Athens.
And that aircraft is refueling for the continuing flight on to Algiers. In Algiers, of course, the former hostages will leave the Algerian planes and will be picked up by U.S. Air Force planes to take them on to Rhein-Main Air Base just outside Frankfurt, West Germany.
We wonder if President Reagan has been given that news. He's smiling and waving. He doesn't, haven't seen anyone whispering to him, but one assumes that he's getting word. This is the American Driving Society. These are 4 in hand. Is that what it's called, Ted, I believe? If I look out the window, I can see a little clearer. Yep, 4 in hand. And the Fort Walton Beach High School Band. They're called the Pride of the Miracle Strip.
I must say, at a time like this, you may regret the fact that you're not here to see these bands in person, and it is a stirring sight, but on a day like this, you're best off at home watching television, because there is no way without television that you could be taken to all the parts of the world and all the parts of the country that you need to see today. But for the moment, what we're looking at is this glorious inaugural parade, and down there on the street is Charles Gibson. Charlie?
Ted, believe it or not, this parade is running a little ahead of schedule, actually. They were due to come off in an hour, and by my count, this parade is about half through. It was interesting and maybe ironic that as former President Carter was speaking down there in Plains, just at that point, going past the reviewing stand, was the the United States Naval Academy and its troops, and of course that very interesting because he was a graduate from there, and that was very special to him. There's the first float in the parade. That float is from the south, specifically from Knoxville, Tennessee. It is one of only 2 floats in this parade, and Knoxville is having a World's Fair in 1982. They chose to advertise that fact with a float, and there are inside that globe, which represents all the nations that will be exhibiting at the World's Fair, there is inside that globe 5,000 balloons, which they supposedly were going to release along the parade. I don't see any balloons spewing out now. Maybe they'll save that for when they go by the reviewing stand. But there are only 2 floats in that part of the austerity of this parade, the short, snappy parade, as we've referred to it a few times, and as they refer to it. And what they did was cut out a lot of floats. They also cut out a lot of high school bands, which made some congressmen unhappy because it used to be one of the congressional perquisites that you could call up the old home district and order up a high school band, and the congressman looked good and the band looked good. It was all fine, but they cut it way down this year, and as a result, the old tradition of having a band from each state went by the by, and this time they had about 600 bands apply, but they only invited 25. And right behind the float, I believe, will come another one of those. But as I say, Ted, the parade marching on schedule, maybe even a little bit ahead of time. And, that's a feat, I think.
Well, it is indeed, Charlie, but they are moving through here rapidly, but there's still a great deal of parade to go, although I understand the tail end of the parade.
There go the balloons. There they are.
There they go.
All right. Well, I ordered it up a little early, I guess. I don't know if they had a little man in there blowing them up or not, but I think they probably sneaked them in early. We waited to try to see them when we were down at the staging area, whether we could see them stashing the balloons, but...
If they did, Charlie, he's breathing helium.
That float now that you just described, Charlie, is right under our window. It's what President Reagan's looking at. More balloons just went up. Knoxville, Tennessee.
And down at the other end of the road, you will see the last element of the parade now moving into position. And the last element of the parade on a mobile stage is, as you can see, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Now we're going to whip you from the tail end of the parade back up to the head of the parade again.
Very briefly, Ted, this is the University of Tennessee band going by now. There was competition among all these bands. The only 2 bands that were invited without competition was the Strom Thurmond High School Band, which went by just a moment ago. And for obvious reasons, they did not go through competition. The Strom Thurmond Band, he's the head of the Judiciary Committee. We're very nice to Strom Thurmond, of course. He's an outstanding Republican. And as a result, they invited the Strom Thurmond High School Band without competition, and then the Dixon, Illinois High School Band. They listened to tapes, supposedly, of all these bands before they invited them. But Dixon and Strom Thurmond were exempted from that. Dixon, of course, the hometown of Ronald Reagan. And more balloons. This next unit is the Appaloosa Horses. As I mentioned earlier, talking to Frank Reynolds, they have tried to get every brand of American horses in this parade that they can possibly do. Every breed, apparently, that is widely used in this country. And the Appaloosa is one of the most outstanding. It's all the way from Appaloosas to Welsh ponies to Lipizzans, all the way through. Run the gamut. And these are 20 riders from Maryland and Virginia and Pennsylvania right around here. All these groups pay their own way. And pay their own horses' way, too, parenthetically. And a lot of them from around here. One of the groups from Sacramento was telling us when we were up at the staging area just how expensive it is to cart all these horses in here, ship them all in, as they had done.
All right, we will have more parade, and our coverage of Inauguration 81 continues in a moment.
Attention, ladies, introducing stovetop New England style and San Francisco style. 2 delicious new stuffings. The secret is the bread.
All stuffings have bread.
Not these kinds of breads.
New England style has white and rye bread for hearty taste.
Rye bread.
San Francisco style has white and sourdough bread for zesty taste.
Sourdough bread.
Great stuffing. What's the secret?
The secret is the bread.
Stovetop instead of potatoes, New England style and San Francisco style.
Remember the first time we walked like this?
If you build a fire, I'll make the General Foods International coffee.
Celebrate the moments of your life.
It's delicious. It tastes creamy.
It's orange cappuccino.
We've never had orange cappuccino.
Well, I still have a few surprises left.
Celebrate the moments of your life.
With General Foods International coffees.
Is the Middle America sequence. We've had the Southern sequence, now the Middle America sequence. Charlie Gibson will tell us a little more about the individual units. Charlie?
The parade now a half hour old, Barbara, and we've already gone halfway across the country. That's not bad. Pretty good in the jet age. This is part of the contingent of U.S. Army coming by. They've had some training and doctrine command. The color guard went by from the Army. This is a National Guard reserve marching unit coming by. There are, in all, about 4,000 marchers in this parade and about 4,000 musicians from the various high school bands. President Reagan giving them all a little applause. Some of the Army men, as they went by, shouted something out. Maybe you could hear that. I couldn't as they went by. We're down here in the street, and when a band goes by, we are drowned out. We hear the band, and that's it. Nothing else in consciousness as they go by. It is a pretty panoply as you look down Pennsylvania Avenue. I mentioned earlier they're marching not quite as fast as some of these military units would like to go, or perhaps are used to going, but they've slowed it down because the high school bands are not used to parading quite this fast. This is the Medina Black Horse Patrol coming by. They're from Chicago, 15 riders and horses. Just one more of the units going by. This is a riding group from Chicago, been in existence about 25 years and invited. I'm told by the parade organizers they went out and found just about every riding group that they could find. There's about 29 or 30 riding groups in this parade, and that's not bad for just 1 hour. Just about every other group, a riding group, and of course that reflective of now President Reagan's, can't get used to that, President Reagan's interest in horses. This is the Hutchinson High School Band from Hutchinson, Kansas. And an interesting story about them, a radio station out in Hutchinson turned over the station for a day to this group and allowed them to be the disc jockeys and the salesmen for the day, and they kept all the receipts for the day. I don't know if we let out a trade secret of that radio station out in Hutchinson, Kansas, but the kids made $6,500 for the day and used that to come to Washington. There's a lot of very bizarre money-raising schemes that were used by some of these bands. As I mentioned, they all pay their own way. And so there are a lot of car washes and raffles and all that jazz. But some of these groups found some rather inventive ways to raise money. And there's a band coming up a little bit later in the western section of the parade that raised $190,000 to get here. That's a lot of cakes and cookies. They auctioned off a good bit of stuff. These are draft horses. These are the gentle giants, the big horses coming by. They belong to a farmer up in northern Massachusetts. And he didn't even apply to come. They just called him up. They read about him in a journal somewhere, a country journal, a small magazine. And these horses apparently can pull a lot of weight. And since they didn't have any draft horses in the parade, they invited him on up. A little Western attire there. The president. And this is the Dixon High School Band, hometown city here. As I mentioned, there was competition. There was some reluctance, apparently, to invite the Dixon High School Band. They weren't invited at first, and folks of Dixon called up the president, or that time president-elect, and said, let's have a little hometown loyalty here, and indeed the invitation went out. He did not actually graduate from Dixon High School. He came out of the Dixon public school system, but didn't go to this high school, I'm told. The invitation was extended after they called it to the attention of the new president. And these are the Indians. Princess Pale Moon is one of the Indians in this group. She's somebody who always seems to show up at Republican gatherings. Somebody referred to her as the Republican token Indian not long ago. That's not very polite, but anyway, she sings at the Republican convention, sang the national anthem in 1976 and 1980, and is now in the parade. And one of the Indians there is Iron Eyes Cody, who most Americans know. He is the Indian who appears in that commercial with a tear coming out of his eye at the spoiling of the American landscape. And then to Chesterton, Indiana is next. The Chesterton High School Band. They kept files, apparently, on all these bands, and as I mentioned, listened to tapes of all of them, and that's the way they chose who could be invited. Chesterton, Indiana. There is a place down the street a ways, about 2 blocks away from here, and there's a big sign up which says, "Stop playing here," and the music ceases. Folks who happen to have bought seats along that particular part of the parade get cheated a bit. But they stop playing, and then they march along a little ways, and then there's another big sign that says, "Start playing here." And so they do. And that is so that each of the bands, as they go by the reviewing stand, will be playing exactly the piece of music chosen. And they've all chosen in advance what they will play as they go by the reviewing stand. This, the Hella Horse Patrol, as you can read, from Dallas, Texas. Traditional Western dress, it says here. That doesn't look too Western. Texas flags there, but I've seen more Western dress than 15 horses and riders. One of the groups that went by, I should mention the Lipizzan horses that went by while we were away watching former President Carter. There were supposed to be 7 Lipizzan horses, and there were only 6. It's just like going into a big athletic event. One of the horses came up with some pulled ligaments. Had to pull him. I guess he went on injured reserve there, and they went into the game with only 6 instead of 7. And now the U.S. Marine Corps. Play it pretty well, don't they? And this is the Marine Corps marching unit from the Marine Barracks here in Washington, which is very near the Capitol. It was President Thomas Jefferson who decreed that those barracks should be built and located within marching distance of the Capitol, he said. And they are there, and they give a performance every Friday night in the parade grounds of those barracks that is a sight to behold. It is something else. This is the second float in the parade, the Middle America float. And that is the Purdue University Singing Chorus. This is supposedly the largest float that has ever been put in an inaugural parade. As I mentioned, one of only 2 in this parade. Okay, Ted, Barbara?
Thank you very much, Charlie. That's an extraordinary sight. The Horn of Plenty there spilling out. Really a magnificent parade that's going by here. And there you have a view of the mall, and around the mall tonight there will be a number of locations whence will come the inaugural balls. In fact, you see there some of the great helium-filled balloons that are suspended just above the mall. And in the back there, you see the bottom of the Washington Monument. Behind that, of course, the Lincoln Memorial. And around the periphery of this whole area will be several of the inaugural balls that the Reagans will attend tonight. Our coverage of Inauguration 81 continues in a moment after this from our local stations.
Wednesday on 8 is Enough, Joni falls in love with her boss and Nancy becomes a celebrity.
And now the daring high wire act of hamburger fries and soft drinks.
Thanks, Ronald. That's okay. I always know where to catch a great meal at McDonald's.
Now, Old West Happy Meal boxes are at participating McDonald's with cutouts of Ronald and the McDonald Land characters on the back and Old Western buildings on the front. You can collect them all for a make-believe Old Western town. And inside, there's a prize. 6 Old West Happy Meal boxes, now at McDonald's.
Good news, America. M&M Mars has increased the size of your favorite candy without increasing its price. 3 Musketeers, 9% bigger.
Wow, same price.
Snickers, 8% bigger. Same price. Mars Bar, 10% bigger.
Yep, same price.
Milky Way, 15% bigger. Same price. Twix, 11% bigger. Same price. M&M's plain and peanut chocolate candies, 10% more. Same price. You get more for your money from M&M Mars.
Fresh canned peaches, sir? Hold the rest.
You fiends!
Let's skip dessert.
MASH, weekdays at 5 on TV2.
You're watching WNGE TV2, Nashville. Well, it has been an extraordinary day, and we've been trying to weave several threads of this day into kind of a fabric of what has been going on. And to those of you who, for one reason or another, have not been with us during the day and do not know where the hostage situation stands, they are not only out, their aircraft, an Algerian aircraft, has landed in Athens at a U.S. Air Force base outside Athens for refueling. All 52 hostages aboard, all of them have been checked out physically, all are well. They will be moving on very shortly from Athens to Algiers, where they will transfer from the Algerian aircraft to U.S. Air Force planes, which will take them to Rhine-Main Air Force Base in Frankfurt, West Germany. From there, they'll be taken a very short distance, about 15 or 20 miles, to Air Force hospitals at Wiesbaden. And ABC News has learned that former President Jimmy Carter, who is now in Plains, Georgia, will be leaving there at the crack of dawn tomorrow morning, roughly 5 o'clock. We'll be returning here. We'll pick up an aircraft here at Andrews Air Force Base, and we'll go on to West Germany so that he, members of his cabinet, members of the National Security Council, all of them now out of office, will be able to visit with the hostages. There is where we stand. They're all out. They're all well, and we look forward to welcoming them back to the United States as soon as possible. Barbara?
What we have behind us in the parade, we've just had well, I shouldn't tell you what you missed. You might feel a little bad, except the hostage story was important. We did see the Alaska dogs, and they're all fine. All the huskies came by, and then we had some more horses, and now let me tell you what we're up to. We're almost up to the Western sequence, I believe. Here is Susan King, in the meantime, to talk with Michael Deaver, who is an assistant to President Reagan, presidential-aide.
That's right. Michael Deaver is also the Deputy Chief of Staff and a man who's been with Mr. Reagan for many years in Sacramento and has been with him during the campaign, knows him. I'm in fact told that you know the President and Mrs. Reagan probably better than anyone else, and so know what they like and don't like, and you're the man things should go through. Tell us what it was like the moment when you found out that the hostages were in fact on their way home and went over to tell the President. I take it was at the luncheon.
It was at the luncheon in the Senate, and we got the word that they had actually left the Iranian sky and had gone into Turkey, I believe it was. And I went over and whispered to the governor of the news, and he threw his hands back and was overjoyed and asked if Senator could begin the toasts immediately so that he could tell the room all the news. He was so excited about it.
He decided the toast was the best way to make it public to the nation, I take it.
Right.
We're having a little tone problem here, so we're going to go back to Barbara and more of the parade.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Mike King. Right now, in front of the review stand is the United States Navy, the Color Guard, and the band of the Navy. The world's finest, the band is called. And then, coming up next, after we've seen the Navy, is this the Barons? That's right. right, the Barons from Fountain Valley, California. They all sent letters to Ronald Reagan saying, please, please let us come, and here they are. Charles Gibson can tell us a little more about them.
Barbara, there is in that group somewhere, I don't know that we can find him, is a 75-year-old bandmaster, a fellow named Phil Moore, who led this band for a number of years and came out of retirement to come here. He had played for then-candidate Reagan at a senior citizens home, as a matter of fact, when Reagan was out there campaigning. And then when they invited the Fountain Valley High School band to come, he joined up and came back as well. Right behind that is the Andalusian horses, if I pronounce that right. These are stallions that are in the parade. And indeed, the sign proves me correct. And right behind them, a fascinating group that we were talking to when we were over in the formation area. The Scripps Miramar. Oh, I'm sorry, this is still part of the Andalusian horses. There they are bowing to... These horses have a marvelous gait, and they are bowing to President Reagan. Mindful of that incident when the horse stopped and President Eisenhower was lassoed that Frank Reynolds was talking about earlier. You're not supposed to stop in front of the reviewing stand. Actually, you're supposed to keep moving, and not just because of the timing of this parade, but because of the Secret Service gets nervous when you stop. And this, the U.S. Air Force band now. Following the Air Force band, some Air Force marching units coming up. It is mindful of the fact that the organizers of this parade, the head of the inaugural committee, had wanted all of these marching units as they came up, each man to be carrying a flag. Robert Gray, his name is, who's one of the co-chairmen of the inaugural committee, he thought it would be an extraordinary sight to see a Pennsylvania Avenue in a sea of flags. Military units weren't crazy about that idea because weather on these days, it is not uncommon that the flags would flap. And if you are in tight formation, as these units must be, the flags would get in the eyes of those marching behind you, and it would just not work. So the flags were scrapped. There was some discussion about whether it was proper for an inaugural parade for these units to be carrying guns. There are not a lot of guns, although some of the marching units have them. They are all not loaded. It says so very specifically in General Order Number 1, which is the one which prevails for this parade. Guns shall not be loaded, and there shall not even be blanks in the parade. This now the Cleveland Metropolitan Mounted Ranger Patrol. I asked somebody why the Cleveland, Ohio unit wound up in the West, and nobody really had an answer. There really was no answer to that. But they've taken some license with the West and Midwest, etc. And then following them, I think you see now the Elko High School Band, Elko, Nevada. Some casino owners gave money to this group. I mentioned some of the unusual fundraising efforts that were undertaken, and some of the good casino owners of Nevada contributed money so that this band could come here. The school had been invited to a music festival out in Vienna, Austria this coming July, but they opted to come here instead. Nevada. They raised, I don't know how much the casino owners gave, but if they gave a day's take, these kids never have to go to school again. Following this, the United States Coast Guard. Staff, and behind it, the Coast Guard Band. Semper Paratus.
Charlie, I think it's only fair to point out, since I made such a point of the fact that when the previous Coast Guard unit went by, that there were no blacks in that unit, that there are indeed blacks in this Coast Guard unit marching by, both in the band and in the military unit itself.
Also, when Charlie said that this parade is a little ahead of time, if you look at the units, not the military units, but the next time one of the high school units go by, you will see on either side military men. They have been assigned to make sure that the marchers keep marching at a steady clip. And we understand that's the first time it's happened. Each unit has its own military men just telling them to keep it up and keep it on the road.
And in fact, as each of these military units goes by, the chief of that particular service stands by the president. So you just see the chief of the Coast Guard leaving the president's side. What you're about to see right now, and it's another one of these extraordinary electronic transitions that is going to take us now from Washington to Algiers. And those lights that you see are not it is not, in fact, the arrival of the hostages. It is the arrival, rather, of those Air Force Nightingale planes, the ones that will pick the hostages up and take them ultimately from Algeria to West Germany. The hostages themselves won't be arriving in Algiers, I think, for a little while yet. If I'm incorrect, I hope someone will tell me. We are in a position right now where we're just trying to bring it to you as soon as it happens. So this, in fact, is a U.S. Air Force aircraft, so it must be one of the Nightingales that has just arrived from West Germany. It is in place so that when those Algerian aircraft, which were in Athens just a short time ago, arrive in Algiers, the hostages will be able to make the transfer and will then be flown to Rhine-Main Air Base outside Frankfurt.
We think that the hostages are still in Athens. Ed, that's the latest word that we have, that they are still in Athens.
These are live pictures that are being transmitted by satellite from Algiers now. Let me just look at my watch. It is 10 to 10 at night in Algiers. And
Luciati is there, Ted, and we're going to try to bring him in from Algiers. Luciati.
The two Nightingale, the medical evacuation planes from Frankfurt, Germany, have just arrived here at Algiers Airport. They're great planes, white top, American flag with a red cross on the tail, are taxiing now to their parking spaces here at the airport, waiting for the 52 American hostages who are on their way here from Tehran. From earlier reports that we heard, Peter Jennings reported, I believe, they may be needed for some of these hostages who are reported to be physically and some of them be even mentally tired. Those two airplanes are literally flying clinics able to take care of all of these people until they can get to a major medical facility where they're going in Wiesbaden, West Germany. The crews of the airplanes are leaving the aircraft now. They're going into the VIP lounge where the hostages will be taken once they land here. It's reported by the Algerian authorities that they will spend about 1.5 hours on the ground where they'll relax a little bit. There'll be some kind of an informal ceremony, we presume, nothing formal. It's obvious that the Algerian government realizes the anxiety of all of these people to get moving and get on their way home as fast as possible, so nothing formal has been planned here. We learned that the foreign minister of Algeria, who played an important part in this thing, will be there to greet them.
All right, well, those were live pictures then from Algeria, and you saw the Air Force planes arriving that are going to pick up the hostages and take them back to West Germany. Let's now look at the last few units in this inaugural parade, back down to Pennsylvania Avenue, and Charles Gibson.
The University of Texas band, Ted, just went by playing The Eyes of Texas. And what would a parade be without that? This is a bagpipe group from Oregon, the next to the last group in this parade. You couldn't see the Lake County Sheriff's posse that went by just in front of them, another horse group, but this Lake County group had been so worried about these bagpipes behind them that they had been bringing live bagpipers into the stalls for a while to make sure that the horses wouldn't shy, and indeed they didn't. These bagpipers, the youngest 22, the oldest 69, and talked to the 22-year-old, asked him if he was good enough. He said a bagpiper never gets really good enough, never believes he's really good. You never perfect the instrument, apparently, he said. But he is here anyways. And right behind that, you can see now in the long shot of Pennsylvania Avenue. There's the horse group. There's the horse group that that had rehearsed with bagpipes. They are well used to bagpipe music. If horses can be bagpipe aficionados, they are it. You can hear some of the bagpipe music. And then the last group in the parade, in a very long, really flatbed truck, but it is the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, and they will stop in front of the reviewing stand and sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
if it's possible to bring the house down in an outdoor parade, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir has just done it, and indeed...
Salt Lake Mormon Tabernacle Choir has been proud to honor you with the Battle Hymn of the Republic. We with you wish you well on your great new beginning as we go marching along together.
That was the choir conductor, Gerald Otley. Did you see Ted, the president's brother, right behind him, wiping away a few tears?
I think the president and the first lady were a little bit misty-eyed, too. And the slogan on the side of this great float is America, a Great New Beginning, which is essentially the theme of this inauguration itself. And as dusk falls now on Washington, D.C., it has been a grand parade and a grand day, and I suppose the theme of this new presidency can also be applied to the other theme of this day, and that is the return now of the hostages to their families. That, too, is a great new beginning.
Shortly, now that dark has fallen, there will be fireworks. There's a band concert. The Reagans go back into the White House, and then they get dressed to go tonight to nine different balls. General Omar Bradley on our screen right now. The President saying goodbye to the general and his wife. The general was the Grand Marshal of this parade. He's 87 years old.
And as I think we've said before, the only living five-star general in the United States, one of the great World War II heroes.
He's had a long day. He was part of the gala entertainment last night and then led the parade today.
I think we can safely say, Barbara, that this has been an extraordinary day for America as a whole and a particularly wonderful day for Ronald and Nancy Reagan. And they both look as though they have enjoyed it immensely.
As I started, I'm sorry, Ted.
No, I was just going to say it was a great parade. It really was a good parade. It was short. It was only an hour, but boy, they crammed a lot into it, and every one of these units was just spectacular.
And what you could not see sometimes were the flag waving in the grandstands and Mrs. Reagan clapping her hands and the president as well. And as I started to say a moment ago, the President and Mrs. Reagan intend to go to all of the 9 balls tonight, the most inaugural balls that there has been at an inauguration. And Ted and I are going to be covering them tonight from 11:30 to 12:30 to bring you some of the festivities, and the gowns, and the entertainment, Las Vegas-type entertainment at each of the ball sites. So if you can stay up late and be with us, you can enjoy that along with us.
And of course, at the same time, Barbara, we will be bringing everyone up to date on the very latest in the return of the former hostages, and if all is well, they should be returning
just about that time
to Western Europe. Just about that time, they should be landing in Frankfurt pretty close, either before we go on the air. Well, we'll go on the air whenever it happens, but it'll be pretty close to the time that we are scheduled to go on the air, and one way or another, we will be showing you those pictures of the hostages arriving in West Germany and being taken then into seclusion for a few days, so that they can be debriefed and so that they can have a little bit of a depressurizing experience. The President now saying goodbye to some of his closest friends, supporters, family members, staff members, cabinet members, military aides, those who will be serving him in the 4 years ahead, those who will be working with him, those who have supported him all along.
A little while ago, Ted, you know, we had Secretary of State designate Alexander Haig with us, and he estimated that it would be probably a week or so before the hostages came back here.
Well, we talked to a couple of the hostage families, Barbara, and they had been told by the State Department that they should expect that their families would be in Wiesbaden at the hospital there for 5 to 7 days. Now, the President spoke earlier of 3 or 4 days, but I think it'll probably be 5 days.
You mean the former president?
No, I mean the President.
Did President Reagan say that?
I mean President Reagan. He spoke at one point today about expecting the hostages back in 3 or 4 days, but I think that may be a little bit optimistic. They'll probably be over in West Germany for a little longer than that.
And now the President and Mrs. Reagan leaving to go back into the White House, to the private quarters of the White House. They have already brought some of their own furniture there, and they will settle down there for the first time tonight after the balls. Tomorrow they're going to meet with their personal friends, the kitchen cabinet, or as they are now more elegantly called, the Transitional Executive Committee, Ted. Their friends are going to come and say goodbye for a while before they go back home, and then it will be a time to settle down for business. And before that tonight, Mrs. Reagan will put on her spangled, beaded $10,000 gown, which was donated to her by the designer, we understood today, by the designer Galanos. What a beautiful sight.
Isn't that lovely? That's the north view of the White House, and the president now retracing his steps. And it's like those old signs, if you lived here, you'd be home. Well, he does, and he is. Applause from the few people there on the north portico. And the President and Mrs. Reagan at the end of a very long day. Well, it isn't the end of a long day. They just have a brief respite now, and then they can start preparing for those, what, 9 balls, 10 balls that they're going to tonight?
There are 8 adult balls, right? And they cost $100 a piece, $100 a ticket, and then there is one youth ball, and we understand that the President and Mrs. Reagan are going to go to all of them tonight. Dancing at each, talking at each, listening to the entertainment.
Well, we have seen some spectacular pictures today. We have had some spectacular developments today, and it's just been one of the most extraordinary,
it is unique, isn't it?
Days.
There will never, oh, let us hope that, I mean, we'll have other inaugurations. Let us hope we'll never have other hostages, but there has never been an inauguration like this one.
No, it's been an absolutely glorious day for the United States. And Barbara and I will be back in just a moment, but we're going to switch back to our bureau now here in Washington. Frank Reynolds has made it down from Capitol Hill and is standing by there with some late developments. Frank?
Thank you, Ted and Barbara. We just want to recap now the latest information that we have on the movement of the hostages as they make their way finally back to freedom. They are on the ground in Athens. Their planes landed there a short while ago, as Peter Jennings reported. Peter, also, they will stay in Athens long enough for refueling, I assume, and then go on to Algiers. We know that the American Air Force medical planes, the hospital planes, have already landed in Algiers. We had pictures of that just a short while ago. And there the transfer will be made, and the hostages will then be put on board those planes and taken on to West Germany. I want to report on that conversation that Peter Jennings in Frankfurt had with the Swiss ambassador, Eric Lang, in Tehran, who was present there and saw the hostages leave Tehran. He said that they were subjected to shouts of death to Carter, death to Reagan. He said a couple of them had difficulty walking, and he particularly mentioned Bruce Langen, the charge there at the embassy in Tehran, and the highest ranking diplomat, who had been kept for almost all the 14.5 months in isolation from most of the hostages. He had been kept with 2 others in the foreign ministry in Tehran. And we have a picture. It's not very good, but I'm going to hold it up and let you, come on, try to move in here and see if you can see it. I'll try to hold it so that it doesn't glare. It's Joe Subik, Joseph Subik, who was an Army Staff Sergeant. He is surrounded by Iranians who are leading him to the plane there in Tehran. That's Joseph Subik. Boy, you can just tell that he's looking up at that airplane and getting ready to get on board, but he's being escorted, and it looks as though he's really being watched very, very carefully. Lang, the Swiss ambassador, also reported that the hostages, he said some of them were crying, and they acted as though they had not seen one another for a very long time, and that is quite possible, that they had not been able to be in contact with one another throughout the 14.5 months of this ordeal. He said the 2 had some difficulty walking. Well, just to recap now, they are, as far as we know, on the ground. They left Tehran at about 12:33 or so today, within the hour of President Reagan taking the oath of office. They landed at Athens at 4:18, less than an hour ago. That is a refueling stop. They'll continue on to Algiers. There they'll be transferred to American Air Force medical or hospital planes for the remainder of the flight to West Germany. And President Carter, who has already returned, former President Carter has already returned to Plains, Georgia, announced down there that tomorrow morning he will fly to West Germany to greet the hostages personally. He will be accompanied by former Secretary of State Muskie and also by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who served with the President as his national security advisor during these past 4 years. I've been asked to give my final thoughts on this day. I don't think we can do that just yet. The hostages are out. We have a new president. Praise be. Let's go back to Ted Koppel at the anchor booth at Lafayette Park. Ted?
Thank you very much, Frank. The street is filling up now, and the stands are emptying out. The street's filling up now with the people who've been in the stands, and they now going their separate ways around this city. And since we are on the subject of final thoughts, Barbara, it's been a delight. Our day is not yet over. Their day is not yet over. We'll be back later, but for the moment, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I think of all the different threads in the tapestry today that we have had the privilege of covering. The constitutional government, the knowledge, of course, that the government goes on, the human story, Jimmy Carter finally making that speech that he yearned to make while he was president, and the new president and Mrs. Reagan, and some of the trivia and frivolity that we talked about, but most of it so inspiring and really great fun to see the parade. And if it isn't corny, the patriotism, the love of country, and the gratitude and I guess appreciation that we have that we're living in this country and can celebrate a day like today.
Elegantly put, and I thank you. We will, of course, bring you up to date on all the latest developments all over the world on World News Tonight, coming up very, very shortly, and then Barbara and I will be back at 11:30 tonight Eastern Time, if not sooner, depending on just when the hostages reach West Germany. This has been one of those truly unusual days, one of those very rare occasions when the nation as a whole can rejoice in a number of things. It doesn't last very long. There will be people who will start to second guess what the former president did on the hostages. There will be people who will begin to find fault with the new president. There will be families that will have the tensions that inevitably come to families. But on this day, and it is a very, very rare occasion, there is rejoicing in what has been achieved, rejoicing for the families, and rejoicing for the nation. It's been an extraordinary day, and it's been a privilege for both of us to participate in it. For Barbara Walters, this is Ted Koppel. For ABC News, good evening.
This portion of Inauguration 81 has been brought to you by the General Foods family of fine products, pleasing you and your family for over 50 years. Products like Maxwell House, Post Cereals, and Kool-Aid Mix. And by the American Gas Association and your gas company, clean, efficient gas energy. Gas, the future belongs to the efficient. More on the inaugural happenings on ABC's World News Tonight. Later, full coverage of the inaugural balls on ABC News Nightline. This has been a special events presentation of ABC News.
America held hostage. The secret negotiations revealed. He met secretly with the Iranians. He panicked in Tehran. He offered to sell out the Shah. He enlisted one of America's bitterest enemies. Now this extraordinary story can be told. An ABC News special Thursday.